So welcome everyone to your next Earthworker series exclusive content where we're working with your guides, working with unseen helpers, divine mothers, divine fathers, Shakti, Shiva energies. We have a special group joining us since it's near the equinox angels joining us add their element of really working well with the human race in the physical body and the metaphysical body. So welcoming your specific guides, all the unseen helpers, and the equinox angels joining us. So let's welcome your personal guide right now, one of the equinox angels joining you to really help with this topic that we're working on today of self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is something that we do innately. That is not beneficial to our welfare, but it tends to be more or less habitual, and we'll get into more of why we do it during the session. So, self-sabotage is something that creates a hassle, creates problems in our daily life, and interferes with any kind of long-standing goals or how we feel about ourselves. So, dropping down into your root chakra, and let's just start with recalibrating the way we connect to grounding, recalibrating the way we connect to ourself as a centered being. So dropping down into the root chakra, and I'm going to create, for some of you who need it, special high frequency grounding structures. And these high frequency grounding structures will help you ground during this time of change where frequencies are changing by the moment, by the week, by the month, by the year, very deeply, very profoundly. And so these high frequency grounding structures are literally like an upgrade, an update to, you see these apps on your phone and computers. It's an update, an upgrade to your grounding app. There you go. So that should help you feel like your grounding is a little bit more effortless. So stretching down beneath the chair, the floor, the bed you're sitting on, all the way down through the building, the home, into the layers of the earth, and connecting to the heart of Gaia in however way you experience it. To me, it's a crystalline ball, or could be a fire, could be just this warm presence. We're connecting to an energetic grid in the heart of the earth. This energetic grid is basically who we are as alive earthen beings, awake and aware, as part of Earth's trajectory of awakening and becoming more aware. And so as this grid connects to us, we can plug into it like a light socket or umbilical cord, and we're going to breathe this energetic nutrition back up into us. As we do this, it's going to help recalibrate our system in a way to really regulate the way we ground, flow with that grounding and centering. So stopping right now at the subroot first chakra, which is a foot below our feet. Whew. And we're just recalibrating any kind of debris or imbalance that again prevents us from really being centered and flowing in our grounding and our divinity for that matter. As universal beings of light and love and a new earth, we're being asked to really flow much differently with our grounding. Flow with more light, flow with more love, flow with more high frequency. But of course, there's any number of reasons as a multidimensional complex being why we're not. So breathing this up into the root chakra, and clearing any kind of debris there. Coming up into the sacral. And sometimes when we get out of body, which we do quite often, our chakras can become clogged, plugged, imbalanced, full of debris. And that's what we're doing. We're just recalibrating, coming into our solar plexus. Into our heart chakra. Into our spiritual heart. Spiritual heart is top part of your chest, into your throat chakra. Into your brow chakra. Into the crown. And cascading all around you in this mandorla effect, this uh, circulating these circles, a toroidal field of circles that really help interface your system. And we're going to transform how your chakras work together in service of this recalibration, and also any of your energetic bodies, pathways, anything that's really out of balance in regards to recalibrating the ability to be centered and flowing in your grounding and your divinity. Balancing the masculine and feminine. And this is, again, a multidimensional practice. It's something that's really enhanced by the team of beings that we're working with and the personal guide that's joining you to help the recalibration process just have a little bit more oomph and strength. So we're going to drop down into the first phase, which is called regulation. Regulation is really important in something called self-sabotage, because in self-sabotage, we may know that these habits and behaviors are not good for us, and the consequences that immediately follow how we feel about ourselves, how we do the self-examination or looping. And so the disconnect here could be a regulatory process, a disconnect in the neural pathways, a disconnect in the will, in the willpower, or even a disconnect in the body somewhere where there's just a lack of caring. So regulation is very important in the process of self-sabotage. And this phase invites you to just be immersed in the energy. This immersion process recognizes you're so much more than this bumpy ride called life, and dropping down below the surface of life like you're in the ocean and the waves are a storm. Your life is this stormy mess that's happening. But this invitation and regulation is inviting you to drop down beneath the surface, where the you that is natural and flowing and quiet and peaceful and whole. And as you dropped below the surface, then what's obvious to Source and to the guides that are working with us is what isn't regulated. So we're doing it the opposite way we normally do. Something is in our face and we deal with it. Here we're looking for the more subterranean, the more hidden, buried things outside of our awareness. And the next phase will help illuminate those. But right now, we just want to regulate our system, and it's going right to your third chakra, your sacral, how you feel about yourself. Your third chakra is how you do or don't control life. Think of self-sabotage as again a habitual way of just not caring. Because the consequences are not necessarily immediate. Maybe it's something that just trickles in, or the connection may not be clear. Again, the self-awareness, there's a disconnect there. And there's a disconnect between the self-awareness and the ability to do anything about it, or the capability, because again, it's not just a self-affirmation. We all tried those self-affirmations. They just don't work when there is underlying beliefs that we're not aware of that neutralize them. And these underlying beliefs can be tied to parental wounds, can be tied to ancestral genetics that they inherited, can be tied to karmic histories that are shared with the genetic ancestral patterns, all interwoven into tight little knots. So no matter what kind of affirmations we throw at them, on the surface, these deep down behaviors anchor in these self-defeating processes that we just, by rote. And some of the things that self-sabotage do is, procrastination, any kind of addictive behavior, where you're self-medicating, trying to forget, like drugs, alcohol, comfort eating, any forms of self-injury. And it could be a little bit more subtle, like perfectionism. Perfectionism is a self-sabotage because you're literally looking for this perfect version of yourself to feel good about yourself. Anytime you have, again, going back to the addiction, any cravings that food, drink, sex, gambling, other temptations that really come at a painful cost. So that's the definition of self-sabotage. It's something that really brings in a problem, interferes with your ability to have good feelings about yourself, to have a life filled with health and wellness and wholeness. And really, the baseline is these underlying forces that are tied with dysfunction, distorted beliefs, that underneath that is tied to wounds, old wounds that are unhealed, unresolved. So we don't really trust our capabilities or feelings. And then we lash out because we don't know what's going on within ourselves. We lash out at ourselves or others. So it's kind of a convoluted mess, self-sabotage is. So lucky for us, we're not doing any of it. We're leaning on source. All we're doing here is we're letting go in this immersive process. And we're saying, you got this. You got this, source. And I use the term source as a means of describing divine intelligence, the mystery of these unseen cosmic helpers that have so many different names. A lot of people use the word God. I don't, because God carries a lot of baggage, but God surely is intermixed into it, but just not in the way people think God or goddess is defined. And self-sabotage is how we stand in our own way. Kind of know we're doing it, but again, there's a disconnect. Or maybe underlying, we're serving these conditional patterns. That's the very definition of conditioning, is if we're not aware of them, or we are aware and there's a disconnect. We're literally replicating these self-esteem issues. See, I don't really feel good about myself, or I don't really care about myself on a very deep level. And so therefore we procrastinate, or we dive into perfectionism, or we choose relationships that aren't healthy, or we choose a job that's really stressful, or our finances aren't what they should be, or we waste time. Look at social media. Social media and spending time online or our nose in our phones is one big self-sabotage. Yeah, that hit home for a lot of people. So we're still in regulation. Oof. Now it's going into the emotional body. Oof. And the etheric body. Etheric body is boundaries or lack thereof. So when you think of self-sabotage, again, we may have an awareness that what we're doing is right or wrong, but there is no boundary to prevent us from stopping. And also, again, pointing to the deep wounds underneath it or deep patterns of wounds. Because underneath sabotage is, I just don't care about myself enough to do anything about it. But again, and self-sabotage would then beat yourself up about that. But in reality, this could be something you inherited, something your parents did, something that's around us in the world, something as simple as social media. If everybody's on their phone and doing it, we rationalize. Well, everybody else is doing it too. So we're surrounded by it in the soup of human collective consciousness that says, yep, this big addictive behavior we call scrolling through our phone or being on our devices endlessly to disconnect. Well, that's all right. That's a pattern that's everybody's doing. Well, that's a form, again, of self-sabotage. And that bottom line doesn't make you feel good about yourself. When you've been online too much, you get this gray fog that's like this tech that can just envelope you, and you just become dull in areas. Again, self-sabotage is anything that gets in the way of you being your whole you, your perfect you. Because it creates problems of some form. It's a form of destruction, mentally, physically, emotionally, where we hinder our own success and well-being, undermining any efforts that we have to follow a goal or to serve a value. And it's usually really insidious, profound, and universal because it emanates from negative, again, beliefs and conditioning and mindsets that are deeply ingrained. So that's why we're looking at it from a multidimensional perspective to get into the roots. It is a form of dysregulation. So here in regulation, there we go. Pointing at how self-sabotage makes you feel. Like there may be a short-term desire or pleasure that it serves, but the long-term is, it just doesn't make me feel good about myself. And again, it can be conscious or unconscious. And the beautiful thing about where we're working is we're doing both. We're raising your awareness into the patterns of self-sabotage, but we also have our divine guides working at the level of unconsciousness. So let's dive into there, shall we? So we're going to gently go into the next phase called embrace. Oof. where it highlights these places of dysregulation that are typically hidden or buried or in the shadows, or maybe we're disconnected from it, and instantly brings in levels of either awareness or love and peace to access, create a kind of environment like nurturing, understanding, so that we can link these and bridge into these places that tend to shrink back or hide, or again, are really buried in their subterranean subconscious. This behavioral dysregulation can sometimes, again, be so habitual that we don't even know we're doing it. The very definition of conditioning. Or we consciously do it and we go along with it anyway. So embrace is helping to illuminate and highlight those areas with understanding, with compassion, with love, with a piece of equanimity that says, no matter what you're doing, I bring in acceptance, which is a form of awareness that doesn't judge. It is detached from the actual behavior, not in a way that self-sabotage is detached. It's detached in a healthy way that the story doesn't pull you in. The difference between self-sabotage and detachment, self-sabotage pulls you in consciously or unconsciously into a story about yourself that's deeply buried. I don't feel good about myself. I hate myself, or I hate my different parts of myself, tied to some sort of wound. Or detachment says, I see that, and I'm not going to get pulled into the story of it, but I also have the ability to do something about it. See the difference there? So that's why awareness is your superpower. It's your superpower to really tackle the areas of this behavioral dysregulation. I like that term, behavioral dysregulation. To illuminate those areas on metaphysical, multidimensional levels. So we can access them for transmutation, alchemization, transfiguration, release and clear, transform them. That beautiful word transform means to take something in one state of consciousness and bring it back to balance, to homeostasis, to wholeness. But first, we have to be aware that it exists. And the insidiousness of self-sabotage says, I'm kind of aware of it, but I'm stuck in these habitual patterns because of some disconnect that says I'm not aware of it enough to do anything about it, or I just don't care to do anything about it. So embrace, illuminating those areas, going right into your guts, your stomach, your back, your hips, your genitals, your brain, your spine, your legs, your feet, everywhere where this pattern is, to illuminate, highlight, especially any hidden, raw, vulnerable areas. And I'm going to bring in another term, which you may or may not be familiar with, another aspect of self-sabotage is what I just talked about, that disconnect. And that disconnect has a name. It's called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is that internal imbalance that is a discomfort that's experienced when words or actions do not align with the beliefs and values. So again, it totally defines that disconnect of self-sabotage when we open up the refrigerator and we look for food, or we mindlessly eat and we're not really even hungry, but it's a habit. But there's a cognitive dissonance that says, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm doing it anyway. That's when your words and actions don't align with your beliefs and values that say, and cognitive dissonance is that act to find comfort by changing those words and behaviors and reframing them. But again, it takes awareness. You have to be aware that you're kind of doing this by rote. And there is even deeper aspect of that cognitive dissonance. Again, those hidden patterns of wounds that kind of hold the cognitive dissonance in place in certain aspects of our body. Because we don't set out to intentionally sabotage ourselves. In fact, we're probably aware. So this is a great time, if you're awake and aware during this session, to practice some self-introspection, some self-awareness, and list the ways you may be self-sabotaging. How does self-sabotage manifest? How does it present in your life? Second part of that equation is, where do you feel it in the body when you say self-sabotage, or when you write down some of these lists? Where does it hit in the body? And this is just learning to connect. From the way your body is already talking to you. Because chronic self-sabotage really depletes the motivation factor, the drive. And of course, the obvious detrimental effects are depression, sadness, anxious. Really damages our self-esteem. We don't feel good about ourselves, right? Okay, beautiful. So now we're just going to come into energize just for a couple of minutes. And we're going to refuel those areas that have been depleted by what we just highlighted, what we just regulated. It's going again right to your guts, to your backbone, your brain, to your heart. We're going to optimize the areas, meaning clearing what's been weakening, strengthening what's depleted, bringing up the energies if they're too low, harmonizing if something's stressing you out too much. This is very necessary application to a dimensional approach, because if we're trying to clear something and it's already weakened by what we're trying to clear, it's not going to clear effectively, efficiently. It's like you're trying to lift a weight that's just beyond your ability to lift it. Ooh, it's going to the emotional body. And that self-esteem and that woundedness. There we go. Because ultimately, way deep down, like a river you didn't even know was there that was feeding, like self-sabotage is a symptom. Self-sabotage says, I have a deep wound and this is what I do about it. But I'm doing it unconsciously. There's a disconnect. And when we deal with multidimensional aspects of who we are, we realize that what we know to be us is literally the tip of the iceberg. We can do self affirmations until the cows come home. But if deep underlying patterns negate the affirmations, they're really going to have minimal impact. And what self-sabotage is pointing to is really deep-seated beliefs that you're just not good enough. Self-esteem or woundedness or some hurt or trauma. And again, I'm not getting particular stories because for each of you, they're different. There's going to be some other mix of patterns of how you've been wounded or hurt or traumatized that may be linked to your genetics, your ancestors. It may be linked to karmic issues, meaning your incarnational past, what you inherited and brought forward from your past lives. It could be linked to your environment, of course, around you, which is what most people point to, but that is literally 1/5 of your conditioning. It's surrounding you in the collective consciousness. That's impacting you. And of course, there's the divine blueprints that intercede on all the behalfs of all the other conditioning and play out in these convoluted patterns to create the trajectory, the reality, the personality of who you think you are. So it's a complex mess. It's not as simple as I know. And that self-sabotage is literally the definition, the poster child of unawareness. Because we know we're not supposed to be doing these things. And yet we do them anyway. Why? Because we have these deep underlying patterns that support these behaviors that are toxic or imbalancing. And there's any kind of ways that we could have gotten it. Of course, we model it from our parents. We see the way they do and don't deal with conflict. We could have had rejection, neglect. But underlying all that is unhealed trauma. So this particular Earthworker exclusive content is coming in preliminary, dealing with mom and dad conditioning. And that is the deepest kind of wounding that we don't know about. Again, not just the surface stuff by how mom and dad treated us, but the wounds that they carry forward from their ancestors before them, and then how they project that onto us or how we model it from them, and the karma we share with them, and the karma that they learn from the environment around us, what we learn from the environment around us. So see how convoluted it is? So we are so lucky to have a team of guides working with us, for us, as us. Because ultimately, when we realize just how divine we are, at our core, at our essence, and the conditioning around us is what prevents us from really truly understanding and being that, because it's even not a fact of understanding, because it's not a mind game. We have to realize that we are whole. We have to realize that we are presence itself. We have to experience a state of consciousness that says, I am a divine being, beyond fear, beyond pain, beyond self-sabotage. But the only way we can do that is to dive into these patterns called separation consciousness that show us we're not. And it's not easy. And it's not sexy. But it gets results. Gets results. The results that ultimately you want. And self-sabotage ultimately is a reward. But the reward is negative. How in entertainment, when you see celebrities or you see politicians do something really bad, the reward is they get publicity, right? And same with our body. When we have these negative patterns, deep, deep, deep underlying of how our mom and dad treated, how our ancestors treated them. It's how society treats us as females or as minorities or as, lineage history. We have Native Americans. If you have Native American blood, we have Jewish, horrors. That if you have Jewish blood, we have African American. We have all sorts of oppression, of wars, of times, of famine that are deeply embedded in our genetics. And that are unhealed, unresolved, unprocessed. And so that's like this flowing river. And sabotage fills the need. It says, I know that's there. And rewards you and saying, see, deep down, you don't really feel that you deserve it. And so some cycle of destructive behavior continues. So we need to dive into that void, and that's what we do here very well. We start with the void, that immersive process. It continues. Okay, so now I'm just putting in structures now, all kinds of structures. To help pinpoint self-sabotage in you wherever it exists. So it's like you're running into divergent aspects of yourself. Again, on the surface, you're like, oh, I know I'm whole. I know I'm loving. I know I'm blissful. But these underlying patterns are chaotic and say, no, hell no. You're bad. You're evil. You're ugly. You're deficient. You're, hurtful. You're hateful. And these are, again, deeply embedded that most of us aren't even aware that's there. If I had a nickel for every time someone said, I thought I worked on that, that's the nature of dimensional processes. Is there's always layers of things we don't know about. That's the hidden side. That's the blind spot. That's the shadow side, subterranean, subconscious levels. And so the structures are pinpointing them so we can access them. Like little dots on a map. Go here, go there. Beautiful. So now we're going to drop into this phase called letting go. We're going to start working. And that's the nature of this is self-sabotage tends to be avoidant, resistant, hidden, blind. So we have to approach it in layers. We have to prepare your system before we can even access the deeper aspects. So what we're going to do is clear some choice points. Whatever choice point needs to be moved will move within you, whether it's just a regular karmic, genetic, body, mind. When choice points are literally the spark in this lifetime where this energy signature says, I'm going to play itself out in your life. And so when we clear that, think of like it as the hub of a wheel, the spoke of a wheel, then everything attached to that hub has nothing attached to it. And so it's much easier to clear. So So you can hear me breathing for a little bit. Ooh. So this can also touch on, and this isn't going to be a popular thought, but I'm not doing, I'm just kind of a channel. This is also touching on the deep, dark aspects of yourself that think of yourself as evil. Evil is, again, a pattern of ancestral history or incarnational history, maybe past life or where you were. And we all have had aspects. Look around our country right now. Look around the world. There are evil aspects displaying themselves all the time. Now think of all the generations that were brought up in even darker times. So we all have had patterns. We like to think of ourselves as saintly, as wonderful in past lives, but we've all had past lives where we were evil and did unconscionable things. And so the root of self-sabotage would, of course, touch on some of those aspects, because self-sabotage says, psst, secretly I know you're bad. That's a piece of awareness, while really uncomfortable to sit with and process, is a lesson in detachment. To be able to look at yourself and see these evil traits that are very deeply buried, either in your ancestral history, your karmic personal history, out in the world, even in this lifetime, to own that, to see it, to embrace it. And the human nature says, nope, I don't like discomfort. I'm just going to leapfrog over it. And that's what self-sabotage is. I'm going to leapfrog over that discomfort. That says deep down, not even just self-esteem, deep down, I know I'm really bad. Which, when we're dealing with mom and dad, if we have a mom and dad that have dysfunctional patterns within themselves, that's what they're modeling. Because a kid internalizes any kind of projection of bad behavior and says, oh, I must have done something wrong. We don't know any better. So therefore, I'm bad. I'm sorry, mom and dad. I'm bad. They don't know any better. And so these patterns are passed along from generation to generation, and we carry them, pass them along to our kids until we utilize our beautiful self-awareness and we start processing it. So of course it's going to be uncomfortable. Someone needs to sit with that discomfort and say, yep, I see you badness. I see you evilness. Let's dissect you. What are you? And you do it from a level of compassion. And there's no forgiveness needed, because forgiveness implies that that badness was somehow wrong. It isn't wrong. Wrongness is a judgment. Wrongness is a human condition that points to good and bad and ugly. In our karmic history, events play out based on unawareness, really. And then we label them as good and bad. And then that label starts bringing up shame and guilt. And then therefore we leapfrog over that. So do you see how it's a big convoluted mess? So we need to detach from that judgment, detach from that labeling, and just witness that evilness, that badness, and say, yep, that exists. And I'm going to sit with it because no one in my past ever did. But I can, because here I am, my guides, my divinity, my goodness, but goodness in a way that it is neutral, my neutralness, and just allow it to be, allow it to flutter up to the surface as another pattern that limits you, holds you back, and is at the roots of self-sabotage, the part of you that thinks you're bad, in whatever degree that is, whether it goes to evil or whether it just goes to I'm not good enough, and everything in between. Now, clearing the reality streams attached to that, the reality stream says, if I therefore know I'm bad, I'm going to let that play out in my life. I'm going to choose relationships that reflect that. I'm going to choose addictions. I'm going to self-sabotage left, right, backwards, forwards. There's so many ways of self-sabotage, the way we create this dysfunctional behavior. There's so many ways. Like I said, if you could list them before and list them, it's the negative thoughts that loop out of control. That's just the tip of the iceberg. That looping that goes on in your mind that gravitates. Yeah, you did that's a wrong thing. You said that's a wrong thing, and we loop it in our minds over and over and over again. That's just the way that your mind is reacting to that trajectory, that reality stream that says, "Oh, somehow I'm really bad." It's rooted in any kind of counterproductive mindset that supports negativity, disorganization, indecisiveness, any kind of self-talk, perfectionism, feeling like you don't belong or imposter, all forms. All those are forms of self-sabotage. So see, endless, 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 and the behaviors attached to them to support that. I'm going to clear those reality streams. Ooh. Touch the mindset, I am bad. And of course, the mom and dad conditioning, deeply rooted in mom and dad conditioning. Because maybe that's the way they felt too. We inherited in our genes. They modeled it in our environment. We then have karmic histories where we literally played out, okay, I'm really bad here in this lifetime. I know, I've told you this before. I was really an evil sorceress in one lifetime. That karma I'm constantly dealing with. But to pretend I wasn't is a form of self sabotage. But it's also an unawareness of the human experience called our dimensionality. So, see, coming into self mastery is being able to look at this badness, to understand it, to see its convolution in the conditioning, in the inheritance, in the experiential of your personality and the environment around us, in the collective, in your karmic history, in your parents, and show it compassion. I get it. I see. I understand. And then it unweaves, it dissolves. That's the way we help process and allow it to finally heal and unfold as energy that was pent up for so long. And this kind of energy gets pent up, it turns into dis-ease, imbalance, toxicity, and patterns that we then label one of them as self-sabotage. So now we're going to go into what's called the collective unconscious timeline. And this is the karmic and genetic histories. And so you're going to hear me breathing for a little bit. Let that ripple on through. It was a really big movement. And Source wants me to go back and do a choice point specifically for the way the body holds this, which needed to percolate a little bit before we revisit. It's like we had a movement. There needed to be a little bit of space before the next one. There we go. So now going back to a body-mind choice point, the way your body holds self-sabotage, of course it does. Those of you who hurt yourself, injuring, or self-sabotage by eating or sex or any kind of things that really are detrimental to the body. There we go. Well, this is going to take a lot of integration, and we're not going to have enough time to do the integration at the end. So I'm going to suggest, after you listen to this, to go into the Earthworker exclusive content and play the advanced integration. And you're going to get a lot more movement from this. Or wait a day or two and play the advanced integration. When I email this out, I'll include it because this is very deep movements. And very deep movements recognize that all these movements are held in all these different levels of your dimensional energetic system, and they need to be caught up specifically. Okay, so now we're going to go into what's called the collective conscious conditioning, more or less your blueprints, frameworks, and supports, karmic structures. Again, you're going to hear me breathing for a little bit, all pointing at the issue of self-sabotage and that core root of I am inherently bad. That was a nice movement. Again, integration after this, very important. Very important. Go into in depth. And not clearing anything else about the roots of this self-sabotage, part of you that feels inherently bad. Going into your root chakra, or your sacral chakra, part of your womb or genitals, your anus, your colon, your emotional body. So we see out there in the spiritual world a whole ton of self-help affirmations, workshops, promoting gratitude, abundance, all sorts of beautiful things. And they work, they're beautiful. But again, if you have these deep patterns, these deep rivers underlying, to a certain extent, they will self-sabotage those workshops, those affirmations, those readings, those mantras, those drumming, because deep down, there's going to be a part of you that says, yeah, I don't quite believe it. And so that's why this deep work, although not popular, is so very important, because if you really truly want to sustain that gratitude work, that loving presence work, you want to embody it, meaning living it in your daily life, you have to work on the roots. What's preventing you from really being happy, being grateful, being present, being in your body. And that's how to truly get that abundance, truly get that wellness and well-being. Okay, so coming into reorientation, we're just going to bring in the you that's already done that. Has cleared every single pattern relating to self-sabotage. And everyone's different. You might have other wounds affiliated with your mom and dad, or other wounds affiliated with different aspects of being bad or not being good enough that are contributing to this. But let's just say you transform them all, right? There's a pattern of you. There's a piece of you that's already done that in the dimensionality that we call life and universal life. And awareness. And so we're going to bring that pattern in of the you that's transformed self-sabotage on all levels, everything related to it, gained all its wisdom. And it just feels like home, like self-love, but capital S love. When we work on embodied presence every Sunday, that's what we're doing. We're saying, what is in the way of you being this presence, of you understanding it and actually living it and experiencing it? And this aspect of self-love is embodiment of that. Deep in your guts, deep in your soul, deep in your core essence. So we're going to bring in new upper dimensional blueprints to support this new coherence. And it's also a new form of stillness. That looping mentality you have in your brain that just gravitates toward something negative that you did or said, or, oh, we can do this better. That's, again, the part of you that is mentally following a pattern that thinks it's not good enough, and so therefore I'm going to reinforce that. So there's a new level of quiet that's we're accessing with this self-love. So we're going to awaken any of those identities now. Identities that say I'm inherently bad, or I need to prove it by self-sabotaging. And awaken your personality consciousness. And what we mean by awaken is it was asleep in the illusion that says, I need to reinforce this feeling of deep down being bad by self-sabotaging. That's the illusion your personality was playing out. So we're going to wake that up. And bridge this new level of self-confident awareness, self-love, self-presence. That feels really home in your body, home in the universe, home in your spirit, home in your family. Because self-sabotage says if I'm inherently bad, I don't fit, I don't belong, I'm not good enough, etc. See how it all is networked. So we're going to wake up your genetic consciousness now. And break down that old pattern. Which needs to reinforce that feeling of badness through the symptom, the consequence of self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is just a symptom of the underlying root. I am inherently bad, evil, hateful, etc. Whatever version of badness you gravitate towards. And now bridging this into all of your genetic consciousness and all of consciousness itself. Stepping into the truth tower, we're going to bring in the alchemical codes of the you that is standing in the primordial self with your feet in the center of the universe and your crown in the center of materiality in the universe, and your spine merged with all your timelines. These alchemical codes are permeating every aspect of your body, every cell, every atom, every quark, from your feet to your crown and everything in between, and then cascading throughout all of creation. Sending out the same pattern of not just self-love, self-mastery, being at home within yourself, throughout all of creation, especially to your homes, your workplaces, your communities, anything personal related to you, and out to the wider world through beauty of grace. Divine Mother Mira holds space for this every time we meet. So does Mother Earth. The great mystery we call Source. Sending it out to the atmosphere, down to the depths of the planet. And up into the sky, into the oceans, to the forests, lakes, rivers, streams. This feeling of home, this presence is inviting, especially to anyone or anything that feels that badness, that evilness, that disconnect, is looking for that hope, that reassurance, the seeds of self-love that connects them to their presence, sending it out to all of humanity, birds, the insects, marine life, the animals, all sentient and non-sentient life, flowing with the grace of home, of self-love, of presence. So now we're just going to pop into integration for just a few moments. But again, I'm going to invite you to play the integration of your choice, whether it's advanced integration or integration from other sessions. Integrating this beautiful energy of self-love, integrating all the changes that we've made in all space, all time, all realities, all dimensions, interdimensionally, all fields, all realms, physicalizing it and catching everything up. Integrating this universal expression of wholeness, of love, of peace, well-being, of presence. Integrating it in the brain consciousness, in any specific areas of the brain, especially any of that looping, neural pathways. Integrating the nervous system. integrating the chakras, integrating the energy bodies, especially the mental and emotional body, and the way the physical body holds. Self-sabotage, and I'm inherently bad. Integrating the organs, especially the heart as an organ. Integrating the cellular consciousness, consciousness body, all of consciousness itself. Integrating the life field, integrating the luminous egg, integrating the genetics, integrating the assemblage points, and all the intelligence fields. This is the intelligence of the who you think you are and how you fit in this greater scheme, not in just the physical life, the metaphysical life. And bridging it all back into your system. Bring in Devi therapy to act like a dimensional therapist, to bring in relevance, to bring in insight, clarity, or just to work on deeper levels in the genetics. And now coming back to the truth tower and the love, the self-love that was created is a new coherence, enhancing and amplifying the integration, enhancing and amplifying that universal sense of your presence that is so much more than the fear, the patterns of separation that kept you limited or trapped in patterns of self-sabotage. Celebrating the you now in all your grace and glory. Getting a special gift from the equinox angels, a blessing of balance. Beautiful. This blessing of balance is like lighting up your system and smiles on every single one of your cells to come back to balance. That's what homeostasis is. That's ideally what wholeness is. Wholeness isn't this feeling of bliss. It's just balance. The ability to meet anything in life with equanimity, with equilibrium, with surfing the waves of change. Because happiness, after all, is a state of mind, but it's more a state of acceptance of what is. Remember when we talked earlier about the reason that evilness or badness is held in place is there's a part of you that's attached to its story, its shame, its guilt, its emotion, and it carries it out through consequence, through patterns, through habits of self-sabotage that says, see, secretly I know you're bad, and you may not even know you're bad because these are inherited or subconscious or subterranean patterns. But parts of you do, and self-sabotage is going to prove it. So if you have any kind of self-sabotage, you have these layers of badness. So to admit it, to own it, to see it, to process it, to not allow it to pull you into its story is true happiness through acceptance. And that is how we grow and evolve. What a blessing. What a blessing from the equinox angels. This blessing of balance in whatever way it serves you, whether it's a raised awareness, whether it's a new physicality, whether it's an emotional silence or mental stillness. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's now ending with a Sanskrit mantra, which is a prayer of balance to a certain extent. It's a prayer to be moved from darkness to light, from untruth to truth, from death to immortality. It's a prayer of peace. And maybe we conduits of that peace through our inner balance. Asatoma Sakamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Yutyorma Hamtram Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Peace, peace, peace. May peace continue to evolve and create more peace. Let it be asked, let it be done. So it is, so it is, so it is. Bring you up and out of the sacred space of grace, taking a couple of deep breaths to be here and now in the presence of the you in the outer world and inner world. Feel free to stay in this flowing space of grace for as long as you feel guided. Until next time, be blessed.